Okay, so back to where I was. In regard to the Picton murders and the women who were missing because they were vulnerable, they were addicts and things like that. The investigation in its early stages, when the communities were raising the alarms, it wasn't taken seriously by the police. And so it ended up to be this colossal, horrific tragedy. So many women got swept under the rug, and horrific miscarriages of justice. I was fortunate, though, that Larry Campbell was the former BC coroner I worked with for a time being, and he was probably one of the staunchest advocates for justice for vulnerable people, murdered, missing women. Everybody should have justice when it comes to knowing what their circumstances of death are. So really what I'm getting at with all of this, okay, so how this all relates to COVID is really, really, really important, and how this, I think this new legislation I was reading is alarming. So I'll give you an example. What happened to my mom? Okay, so she was killed. It was obvious. She died of internal injuries. However, the pathologist, who I kind of knew and I didn't like, decided instead that he ruled her death as natural. And, you know, when that came out, I was just beside myself. I was shocked. And I honestly didn't know what to do. I called my coroner friends, because obviously I'm very close to all the coroners, working with them for over a decade. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why the hell did they say this was a natural death? This was not a natural death. They ruled her cause of death as having underlying conditions with high cholesterol and a fatty liver. Well, sorry, that doesn't cut it. My mom was active. She was fine. She, maybe was a bit overweight, and she had little issues, but she was fine. She was healthy. She was working full time. She had a very big job. She was working 7 days a week. She was, hardly infirm and hardly going to the doctor. She wasn't really complaining of a lot of illness. But, obviously, when you age, you do have underlying comorbidities. We all do at some point. But they made this insignificant comorbidity of a fatty liver and high cholesterol as being her cause of death, and not the internal hemorrhaging from the serious injuries that expedited her death, which was she was killed. So that was really shocking. And had I not had the experience I had, to push for a secondary review, and in the inquest, I did just that. I ended up getting a second opinion by another doctor to have a look at her. But by that time, we'd already had her funeral, so couldn't just pull out her body again. He reviewed the autopsy notes and said, "My God, this pathologist, what was he on? No. Her injuries were as a result. Her death was a result of her extremely serious injuries. This was not a death due to a mildly fatty liver or high cholesterol." So what I'm saying is that my mom was about 61 at the time of her death. So older people who died unnaturally perhaps were killed. Instead of having to go the whole coroner inquest route, having to deal with the complex pathology reports, and to actually requisition the pathologist to come to the inquest to give evidence, it's a big deal. It takes a long time. Pathologists, they can't stand it. It's a lot of work. It's paperwork. So, they'll do whatever they can to get out of it. And the thing is, hadn't I been in that world and pedantic and concerned and knowing, and hadn't you know, my colleagues, my former colleagues, been really outraged. My mom's death would have been swept under the rug. It would have been judged a natural death when she was killed. So how this relates to COVID is really disturbing. So the government now, I've read briefly that people who die in the hospital now will not be undergoing a review. They will just get their death certificate signed. There won't be a review. They will go straight to the funeral home. And of course, there is no funerals right now because of obvious safety precautions with COVID. And, you know, obviously even with a body burial, there can be aerosolization of the virus. So it can be dangerous. And I understand this. I saw